Now we want to hear from the president of the National Congress of Black Political Women, which I had something to do when it was founded, including help to found it, who has had a distinguished political career in her own right and has of late been taking the lead on this issue of violence against women, C.Dolores Tucker. Let's bring on.
First of all, I want to say that Reverend Jesse Jackson and the National Rainbow Coalition are to be commended for their foresight in addressing the #1 domestic problem in this nation, violence in America. The National Political Congress of Black Women is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization created in 1984 at the suggestion of Reverend Jackson at the 1984 Democratic National Convention to empower African American women economically and politically. Its founding members do include some of the most prominent and concerned women in America, including Mary Berry and Dr. Dorothy Height, our mayor of this city, Alexis Herman, Dr. Gloria A. Toot, Jewel Jackson McCabe, Reverend Willie Barrow, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, Eleanor Holmes Norton, Curtis Collins, and Congresswoman Barbara Rose Collins. We embrace and salute the goals of this conference. Today we have all come together to join forces to address the issue of violence in the nation. A violence which has decimated our communities, devastated our families, and destroyed the souls of so many of our youth. It is imperative that we stop the agendas that are not too relevant as this, that we stop pondering over the issue of space exploration, that we stop debating whose diary we should publicize, that we stop arguing over what choices each lifestyle has. For today we must be serious about this serious situation, this plague, this death to our society. Our greatest fear right here in America is not from hurricanes or earthquakes, not from disease or war, but from violence one against the other. We must understand clearly that violence comes in many forms and is acted upon by many sources. Whether we are talking about physical violence, spiritual violence, economic violence, or sexual violence, the end result is the same: the destruction of human life. Enough is enough. And I'd like someone to bring me what made me say enough is enough. Where's my graphic? Bring it up here, please, somebody. I am here to put the nation on notice that violence perpetuated against women through the music industry in the forms of gangster rap and misogynist lyrics will not be tolerated any longer. Principle must come before profit. A year ago, I established the National Political Congress of Black Women's Entertainment Commission, headed by Dionne Warwick, Melba Moore, Terry Rossi of Billboard magazine, and Vaughn Alexander, our director. It had one primary goal: the task of examining and developing strategies and solutions for reshaping and maintaining positive images to preserve the dignity and the heritage of our youth. Instead of continuously exposing our youth to negative media that distorts their images of male-female relationships, that undermines the stability of our families, communities, and nation by encouraging violence, abuse, and sexism as acceptable behaviors, and perpetuates the cycle of low self-esteem of African American youth. Thus, images that degrade our dignity and are an insult to our children, our families, and communities concern us too. And that includes all this gangster rap and misogynist lyrics. Music that glorifies and promotes violence with guns, knives, or drugs, and denigrates and defames women. And with the release of Snoop Doggy Dog's debut album, Doggy Style, that includes artwork that is nothing but pornographic smut, available to any child to go in and buy with the album and with a record. That has got to stop. You want to know why I'm on the warpath? When I saw this, I said, that's it. We march again, and we're going to keep on marching and demonstrating the truth stuff. For 400 years, profit came before principle, as black women bore the brunt of slave masters' degradation. But even through the Middle Passage, the peculiar institution of slavery, the spirit of black women and their families could not be broken. Today, however, through the lyrics of rappers who display no respect for women, no respect for families, and little respect for themselves, the souls of our sisters are being destroyed, and so too their progeny. All of us have watched as the industry have grown. We have watched not really knowing, not really understanding, not first realizing the damage that is inherent in what some thought were merely words. Now we see the direct and indirect effects. We see the rise in murders, in abuse, in batterings, teen prostitution, and teen suicide. We hear the wailing mothers, the grieving sisters, the tormented brothers and fathers and children planning their own funerals with pink dresses and pink caskets. We feel their hopelessness and helplessness, and we embrace their pain. Yet in the midst of these tragedies, others still want to argue about the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, a freedom they have embraced to call African American women hoes and bitches and sluts and even worse. As I see it, there are three things wrong with gangster rap and misogynist lyrics. It is obscene, it is obscene, it is obscene. In my view, it was never intended by the founding fathers of this nation that First Amendment rights were meant to protect obscenities. And if there were founding mothers, it would have been more explicit about what the First Amendment meant. Obscenity,
I'm not sure I know that part.
Obscenity has long been an exception. Obscenity, and we have the Attorney General here, I believe it's right. Obscenity has long been an exception to free speech. If the filth that is portrayed in these gangster rap videos and art is not obscene, then I submit that nothing is obscene. In 1992, the Canadian Supreme Court ruled that it was more important to ban speech that is dehumanizing to women than to protect free speech. African American women have always been the protector and nurturers of their homes, their families, and their communities. We march for our rights to Selma. I was there with Dr. King. We're beaten with billy clubs, and we're bitten with dogs unleashed by bull counters. We will not tolerate injustice and insults from our worst enemies then, and we sure ain't going to accept insults from our youth now.
All right. Okay.
Although the MPCBW condemns the actions of those young people who produce such music, we also realize that we must provide other channels for them to use these multiple talents they have in a positive and wholesome way. After all, they are not the root causes of the complex socioeconomic forces that are manifested in such vile entertainment. Those problems were there long before many of them were born. Those problems must be addressed if the communities that produce those gangster rappers are to survive and thrive. We know some of the problems, and now on behalf of NPCBW, I will offer up some solutions so that we can help turn this nation around and communities around. First of all, we must use all means possible to eradicate and ban the sale of illegal guns. We must remove guns from the hands of our children and our gangsters who are so proud of the power of the gun. That's number one. Number two, we must reinvent our educational system to include more vocational training to provide a successful transition between school and work for those who will not continue to go on to college. We must extend the school hours in the school year so that latchkey children teachers will be from their schools instead of from the street. We must provide educational opportunities for our prisoners so that they will be productive citizens when their tour of prison is over. I met with Senator Carol Moseley Braun, and I was very pleased to amend what she was introducing to the Senate, not only educational opportunities, but training opportunities as well. And she has proposed mandated training for all prisoners in education. Now, we must provide...
C.Dolores, now you don't have to say everything you want to say this time. You'll get to talk again.
Well, I've just got one more page, and when I finish, I wait a long time to come, and let me just finish it. Please.
Okay, well, if you
I only got one more little page here.
All right.
To provide community outreaches so that our youth who have embraced the gangs as their only family will find refuge in community institutions, neighborhood academies, and educational programs. Convert our unused military bases into institutions of peace, where men and women can be trained to become productive citizens who will contribute to the well-being of this nation, expand our nation's infrastructure where needed, and make this nation a powerful global force. I stand before you today with millions of my sisters to say that no one has the right to degrade, denigrate, dishonor, or disrespect African American women. No one has the right to poison our children's mind and destroy our African cultural heritage. That is why the women of NPCBW and our supporters will demonstrate. We'll go to jail again and again and again, just as we did when we demonstrated at the Wiz in December and Sam Goody yesterday. No one and no industry will be allowed to continue this social and psychological genocide of the women and girls of this nation. Stand before you today with the spirits of Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Mary McLeod Bethune to say this: we will defy any force that will disrespect us and our families, and I apologize, Mary Berry, my good friend and founder.
We could put the raps on rap.
We've decided to mask or delete 3 words that are heard in a lot of rap records, and they are nigger, bitch, and hoe.
WPGC.
An anti-rap backlash is spreading. WPGC in Washington, D.C. dropped violent or demeaning lyrics 3 years ago. Last month, KACE in Los Angeles followed suit. This week, WBLS in New York City.
It's in pop music, it's in rock music, it's everywhere now. It's an epidemic of bad news for our communities around the country.
Support everything that's positive that's going on in the community.
Stop the Violence, a grassroots watchdog group in Los Angeles, pressed KPWR to rein in rap as a public service.
It's just crazy when you see a 4-, 5-, 6-year-old child walking down the street echoing N-word, nigga, bitch, hoe, killing somebody, this or that, and they can't even say their ABCs.
Some rap artists call this an infringement on their right to free speech. Critics say the artists have a right to say whatever they want, but others also have the right not to hear it.
Rappers like Farside say they're just reflecting street life.
I'm not trying to be no bad man and say bad things. I just talk about what I see.
Rap opponents say they're fighting to save a generation. It won't be easy. Last night at the Billboard Music Awards in Hollywood, one of the most foul-mouthed rappers, Dr. Dre, was upheld as one of the best artists of the year. Bill Whitaker, CBS. The folks at KACE Radio in Los Angeles think so.
When you take a record like Indo Smoke, which is a love song to pot as far as I'm concerned, there's no social benefit to that.
Pass me the joint so I could take a toke. So KACE banned rap it calls negative and destructive.
We're looking at songs whose lyrics glorify violence, glorify the gang lifestyle, glorify disrespecting of women, are blatantly sexually explicit.
I applaud it. I mean, I think it's a very good move. It's a positive move for not only for my children, but for the younger generation.
The top urban station in Washington, D.C. pulled the plug on X-rated rap. In Harlem, ministers called on rappers to clean up their act.
You don't have to degrade our women.
But rap fans remind critics that an earlier generation once tried to ban rock and roll.
I mean, that's a bunch of nonsense, you know. I'm all for it. Person and all that. Gangster music is, you know, it's what sells.
72% of the rap records in Los Angeles are sold to white kids. If anything, this music is teaching them in this generation that they can't turn the other cheek to the problems in the inner city.
Rappers point out that heavy metal weighs in with similar hardcore lyrics.
Lyrics about black-on-black violence to a young mainstream audience that wouldn't dream of going anywhere near a ghetto. Now that some of its stars stand accused of doing what they've been rapping about, life seems to be imitating art, so to speak. Are coming out in force. Some radio stations have refused to play the most controversial rap records. And the Reverend Jesse Jackson said today he may target some of the record companies which distribute gangster rap albums.
Never before has there been such a will to use music, to advertise self-destructive violence. People degrading names, niggas, and women, bitches.
And so I thought about what C.Dolores Tucker was trying to do back in the early 90s with censorship and with making it known that the language, some of the language that rappers were being allowed to use, because rap music and the radio were just like I was just trying to explain about that whole Power 106 situation. You know, all these things were very, very new. This wasn't something that had been out here for a long time. It just wasn't. And so even in those early 90s, it was new, right, to have the radio stations coming. And so people had to decide how that stuff was going to get put out there. And I think for me, I felt like this is an opportunity to see Black people in a certain environment make money in ways in which they were not going to get those opportunities outside of that. And when all this stuff goes away, well, I think Black people are going to go away, to be honest. I can feel it. I feel like people are dissolving themselves out already. And so, because these opportunities are going away. They're going away. Like the guy was trying to, I mean, I don't know if he's serious or not, but you know, it's a lot of videos out here of him saying a lot of racially charged things, very racist stuff. And he kind of tried to say that Black people didn't create rap music. But Black music have been in this country. It didn't just start when rap music came along. Like, the influence of the Black music that was already here is what influenced the rise of hip-hop music. And everybody knows that. Anybody that's trying to pretend like they don't get that are just trying to pretend like they don't get that. And I'm not saying that Caribbean people did not make a contribution, or even Hispanic people did not make a contribution. People have made contributions, but the music was already here. It wasn't, you didn't come in and bring us nothing, okay? So I don't want to hear people trying to pretend like they got some other kind of history going on when the stuff kind of is already laid out if you really go and look for it. Just like they didn't do their research about Tyga. They didn't, you know, clearly people just talking out their neck. They're not doing their research because they wanted to tell the story however they want to tell it. And then it just kind of brings the whole conversation back to C.Dolores Tucker, that we should need to have the utmost respect for ourselves. Because when you start trying to open all this stuff up to all these other people, now they get to come in and say all this stuff, and they may not necessarily feel a certain way about you. They just pretending like they do. So they could get into what you have, right? And say people just want to be a part of somebody. They're so willing to sell that out. And it's that part too. This stuff is not new. This stuff been out here. There's books out here. How to Build a Slave, that whole Willie Lynch letter. You know, it's a lot of stuff out here, a lot of material, a lot of books, a lot of writings that really break a lot of this stuff down. It's not for me to break it down. But as I'm sitting here thinking back on C.Dolores Tucker, I was like, she was right. She was right. And it wasn't just about us having this opportunity, but that, like Malcolm X said, that is what causes a lot of problems, is that we are being held down. We're being held into this position through all the discrimination by way of employment, by way of housing, whatever it is, it limits people. And then people try to lie and act as if those limitations are not there. There's a reason that black people are preyed upon with these arrests. They're preyed upon with these traffic tickets and all this other stuff. This stuff is not make-believe. This stuff is real, right? We're not in the majority, but how are we in the majority of all of this other stuff? How is the little 10% of people in the majority of the things you want them to be in the majority of? Right, because you're not paying attention to the other people, and that's just, you're not treating us with the same fairness and the same forgiveness that you show to other people, right? Like they went in the park and shot down Tamir Rice, but then nobody went into school to save those little kids that was being shot up. You know, there was no urgency to save those children, but it was an urgency for you to kill one black child. You know, it's stuff like that don't get past people. Regardless if people want you to pretend like it's not registering to you, it registers. But it just made me start thinking about C.Dolores Tucker and those other women who are part of her organization, and they were right. They were absolutely right. We have caused. We've done a disservice to ourselves, and now you have all these people running around feeling like they have a right to talk to us any kind of way, but then they want to parade people around with apologies when they feel offended. And it don't work like that for all of us. You know, I can't speak for other people, and then some people in that entertainment industry, they gonna sambo to the grave. Because they feel like that's what they have to do to keep that money. Like Malcolm X said, you know, it's like dangling that steak in that lion's den. People doing anything for that steak. And it is what it is when somebody, you know, have you feeling that you don't have any choice in the matter. But yeah, just like all these communities get to voice their grievances, black people get to voice ours as well. And I think that we need to go back to holding these record companies responsible for taking that N-word out of people's vocabulary, because some of these people shouldn't be using it. And I don't care if you got 4 quarters, 3/5 ounces, and your family is from Uganda, and I don't care. Everybody shouldn't be saying that word, and even the Black American people at this point, they shouldn't be saying it either, because I don't even believe that anybody is even Black American anymore. To be honest, that's just how I feel about it. I think that we probably have already been genocided, and people are trying to pretend like by having all these other people in play in this black box that we haven't been genocided, but we really probably have. And this is why the respect levels are where they are. But yeah, that doesn't give these people a right to be calling people N-words and stuff and using the N-word in music. And then other people can come out and start crying and you know, laying their grievances down, and then you take it off the album, but then you keep the N-word on there. Then you at some music festival, and in a sea of people that don't look nothing like you, and they all using the N-word. Why? You have to be self-loathing to even think that that's cute. You have to be self-loathing when a black man in what state was that? Alabama was shot down 2 or 3 years ago. The Arbery guy, I think that was his name. While the father and the son was calling him the N-word, he was shot down. This wasn't no 400 years ago. This wasn't 400 years ago. And so, no, I'm not going to play the caravan of love game with people. I don't care who people are married to. I don't, like I said, the 3 ounces, 4 quarters, and all that stuff. People shouldn't be using that word. And I'm kind of wondering what happened to the censorship that C.Dolores Tucker and her organization was fighting for. I'm going to come back with part 2.